Hello and welcome. So some of you might know that the Financial Modeling World Cup, which I've been taking part in and doing problems from on my videos lately, has been running for the last month or so a university challenge. So it's like a competition for university students all over the world. And they're down to the last 8 people in a live final tomorrow. If you're into that sort of thing, you should give it a watch. But they also just released the problems that they've been putting them through yesterday, and I thought I would give it a look and see, what does this look like, and could I have done this in college? And a spoiler alert, I did take a look at the problem before this video, and the answer is definitely not. But I'm gonna walk through how to solve one of them anyway. So the question is about trying to work out the best place to put a factory, and let's take a look at the data we're given. So we're doing a 15-year model starting from the middle of 2022. We've got all this information about labor inputs. So, we need 10,000 workers to be at 100% production. Each worker works 500 hours a quarter. We can train up to 1,000 workers a quarter. Labor cost starts off at $45 an hour, increases 3% a year for non-union, 4% a year for union workers, and administrative costs are $5 million a quarter. Let's see, we've got some shipping information. So basically we've got a factory building cars. We build two kinds of cars. We can build up to 10,000 of car A, up to 12,500 of car B. We've got information about what the materials cost and what they weigh, and the price that we'll sell them for, and how many labor hours it takes to build. And then we've got information about the cost of shipping in the materials to build the thing, the cost of shipping out the finished car, inflation rate, cost of capital, how much it costs to build a factory per quarter and how long it takes. And then we've got information on 5 different potential sites. And for each site, we're told how many how big the local labor force that's already trained is. So in other words, we can get started sooner if there's lots of people who are already qualified, whether the workforce is unionized or not, whether there's a tax holiday for some number of periods, what the local tax rate is, and then we sell to 10 different dealers, different percentages of cars going to different dealers, and for each dealer we're told how far away it is from each factory so that we can figure out shipping costs. And we're also told location number 1 is the suppliers. This is where the materials come from, and then this is where everything gets shipped off to. And there's more details in the instructions. I'll refer back to them if I need to, but hopefully we can kind of keep moving along. So that's the setup. Let's go build the model. So the first thing I'm going to do, as I almost always do, is I'm going to start off with just a quarter number and a quarter end date. So we've got a double check now, I think it's a 15-year project will last 15 years, 60 quarters, including the construction period, and we want a quarterly model. So I'm going to say sequence, comma 60 to give me 60 quarters. I'll, as usual, hide everything after that because it makes it easier to copy over. And then the quarter end date. Now, fun thing here, in a video a little while ago, I did something like this. I went to do a quarter end date like this, and then do 3 times d2 hash minus 1. No, I must have done it differently that time because it didn't accept it this time. Okay, never mind. I thought that was going to break, but it didn't, so we can just move on. All right, so just to kind of quickly explain, so EO month saying end of month a certain number of months later, and we're saying 3 times the number we're in minus 1. So in other words, I'm given the date at the start of a quarter, so month 7. So the quarter end date is going to be the end of month 9, so it's going to be the end of the month 2 months later. So my first value is 2, and then after that I want to go up in multiples of 3. So that's why I'm saying the number of months from this starting quarter to the various quarter end dates is going to be 3 times that. So let's just widen everything out and do that. You can also kind of do this a more kind of simple and old-fashioned way by just doing something like this, quarter start, quarter end, and then you can point your first quarter start to here, and then just do EO month that, comma 2, and then that plus 1. And again, we've always got to format as dates and carry that across. It'll give you the same values. But if you can do it with sequence, makes it a little easier to flex the size of your model, so that's a nice thing. And then the second thing that I'm going to do right away is we've got a few different indices going on here. So we've got a labor cost increase rate, union and non-union, and we've got an inflation rate, and we've got a cost of capital. So I'm going to the first thing I'm going to do is set up an indices section, turn off my grid lines. So I'm going to have labor cost, union, labor cost, non-union. Oops. Then I'm going to have my inflation index, and I'll just have my PV factor. I'm just going to put in one more empty row here. Okay, so then for all of these, I'm just going to use Control-Shift-1 gives me number format with 2 decimal places, which is what I want. And for all of these, I'm just going to start off at 1. PV, I'm assuming that the cash flows will happen at the end of the month, and so even the cash flows in the first quarter get discounted. So that's why I'm putting the 1, before the start of the model there. And so then my labor cost union. So we're told labor costs increase occur in January, so the start of every year. So here I'm going to say if my month of the quarter end. Remember, the quarter end at the start of the year is not month 1 but month 3. So if month equals 3, then sorry, this is, I've got union above non-union, which is hopefully the same. No, it's not the same way around as here. So come back here and just sort those. So I have non-union above union. So then, sorry, try that again. 1 plus if month of this equals 3, then this, and I'm going to lock in the column but not the row, so I can copy the formula down and it'll point to the 4% for the next one, otherwise 0. And I need, yes, a second closing bracket. Good. Sorry, don't copy it down to there. So then hopefully I should find in the next quarter that goes up by 3%, that goes up by 4%, all good. So carry that across. Now inflation, we're told, quarterly rate of inflation should be set such that the overall prices increase by 3% a year. So in other words, this is that times 1 plus my 3% here to the power of 1 over 4. And we'll scoot along 1 year, and hopefully we should find that this is exactly 1.03, and it is. That's good. That's working. Carry on. And then my PV factor, I'm going to say this divided by 1 plus that 2.5, so we're 2.5% a quarter here, so we don't need to de-annualize that. So that's my present value factor. You can just use the NPV function to calculate the NPV at the end, but I like to have a PV factor there. So the next thing I'm going to think about is, it's good to have a sense just at the start of what's the kind of ultimate target you're trying to get to. We want to be able to figure out the revenues from all the cars and then all the different costs. So let's just work backwards to what we're going to start with. So our revenues are going to depend on how many cars we can make. How many cars we can make is going to depend on the limiting factor of the labor hours. And so let's start by figuring out how many workers we start off with and how many come online over time. Now to do that, we're going to need to know about the size of the trained local labor force. So first things first, let's location selection. I'm just going to add a new assumption here. And make that a drop-down list linked to here. And let's start off with that at V. And then I'm going to have active over here. And that's going to be, well, first I'll copy, paste the formats. Just the number formats. And then I will do an XLOOKUP. So I'm going to look up the active scenario in this array, returning from this array. One of the nice things about XLOOKUP is you can look up in a one-dimensional array and return from a two-dimensional array, and it'll give you the whole thing. So I don't need to do 4 different XLOOKUPs there. I can just do one. And I'll do the same thing here. Active XLOOKUP this guy in here, returning from here. And just copy the number format in there as well. Okay, so now what are we told about the labor force? Basically, this number of kind of skilled workers to start. That's as soon as we're ready to, as soon as the factory is built, we can hire up to this many people. Obviously, we only need 10,000 people to be at full capacity, so we'll have to limit that. But we're looking at V right now. There's less than that. And then once we have our initial hiring, we can then add up to 1,000 people per quarter and train them up. And we're told that workers spend, I think, 1/4 in training. Where's the bit about training? Yeah, so first things first, once the factory is built, workers can start training. So nobody can start training before the factory is built. Each worker must be trained for 1/4. So the factory is built from Q3 22 to Q2 23. Then in Q3, the next quarter, we train the first group of workers, and then the first cars get produced in Q4 of 23. So let's go and do this. We want labor. So I'm going to have how many are training, how many are building, total, and let's just say employee count. So the number of people in training is going to be, now there's an interesting little thing here. So the first batch starts training in Q5, and then from in quarter 5 is in the 5th quarter of the model. So you build for 4 quarters. Then the factory is finished, you train in Q5, and then you start building cars in Q6. So you could just come here and say, equals the min of the active number of local workers and 10,000, which is the most that you need. And then you could, do a different formula after that. The one challenge about that is, you've got, by the way, in a competition, that is exactly what I would do. It's, just get it done. But the way this is set up, we've got a variable here which is build quarters. So in theory, what if we ended up spreading the build out over more quarters? We'd want this to move over by 1. So what I'm going to do instead, so basically what you've got is you've got 3 different zones. You've got during build time, nothing happens. Then you've got the first quarter when you hire the whole local labor pool up to 10,000 people, and then you've got subsequent quarters, which is everything after here, where you're adding 1,000 up until you get to that 10,000. So if you want to, you can just do that with if this, you can say if it's less than or equal to your number of build quarters, then 0. Otherwise, if and then same thing. Compare the month number to the number of build quarters. If it's equal to the build quarter plus 1, then it's the smaller of how many people are available to hire that are already trained, that are already skilled, versus the number you need. And otherwise, otherwise you're ahead of that. So what you're interested in is the total number you need minus the number you already have. That's how many you'd like to hire, but then you're limited to 1,000 of them at a time. So it'll be the min of that and this. Close, close, close. So we copy that across. So hopefully we'll see, yes, 4,500 come on there. And then building is just going to be whoever was training the previous quarter plus whoever was building the previous quarter. So in other words, up to Q5, nobody's building, then those 4,500 come in, then another 1,000, and another 1,000, and so on. And then we just need a total here. Carry that across. And then hopefully here we'll find, yeah, so there, now we're saying we only need 10,000 minus that, so we only train 5,000 here, and then no more training after that. We're fully staffed up. So let's just give that a nicer number format. So I always like to do this version where you have a dash for 0 because it makes it easier to see, visually see, okay, so there's no activity here during the build period, that makes sense. There's no building in the first quarter after the build period, that makes sense. There's only training, and then there's no training after we've trained everybody up. So that makes sense. Then let's do building hours. And that's just going to be the number of people building, times the hours worked per quarter. I'll copy that format down again. So we'll end up with 5 million building hours per quarter, but we've got to ramp up to get there. And then we're told, so we have 2 different models of cars that we work on, car A and car B. and we are told somewhere here that car A has a higher profit margin, so that'll always be produced first. So when we have limited hours, we're going to allocate it all to car A first. So car A is going to be the minimum of this, and so the most hours that you could allocate to it is 10,000 cars times 250 labor hours, which is 250,000. So, sorry, it's 2.5 million, I should say. So in the first quarter, everybody is building car A, and then after that, we've got enough people to build car A and still have some left over, and then the leftovers go to car B. So that's just going to be that minus that. Carry across. And sorry, that's not supposed to be bold. Okay, so that's the number of building hours, and then figure based on that we can do, let's call it car economics. So now we can figure out how many units are produced, car A, car B, and total. And that's just going to be equals car A divided by labor hours to produce car A. So this is the total number of hours spent working on car A, and then you divide that by the hours per unit. So we figure out, okay, in the first quarter that we're building, we produced 9,000 units, and after that we produced the full capacity 10,000 units. And then car B, let's see, did I do that formula right? I did not do it in a way that I can copy down, so let's fix that. What am I pointing at? Yeah, so this is locked in. So this is actually dividing by the number of hours to build an A car, but I want it to be divided by the number of hours to build a B car. Now, slightly awkward here because I've got A and B vertically above each other here. I've got them next to each other here. But what I can do to sort of take advantage of the setup is I can do this. So I'll stretch that out, and then I will transpose this and just make it go over to the next column. So now if I fill this across, that's my number of units produced. And now it's dividing. So it's basically just taking that 250, 200, flipping it to be vertical with the 250 above the 200, and then dividing these by that. Okay, and then total cars produced. Copy that across. So at full capacity, we'll build 22,500 cars, 10,000 of A, 12,500 of B, which makes sense. And for a total of 5 million hours, 10,000 people working 500 hours a quarter. So that all makes sense. So then, let's see, what's the right running order here? So basically from here we can kind of jump to we can sort of jump to almost anything. Let's just do units, and then we can do, let's group it as car A economics. So we've got the units produced, so we're going to be interested in the revenue, in the labor cost, in the materials cost, materials shipping cost. So it's, in other words, there's a certain cost to buy the materials, and then there's a certain cost to have the materials sent to us, and then there's the cost of shipping the car out, and then we'll just call it gross profit. So what is the revenue from sales of car A? Well, we were told that it sells for an initial $35,000 subject to inflation. So it's the number of units produced. And again, I'll just do this for both of them together. So it's that times the initial cost, which is transpose of that, times my inflation index, which is $8. And we'll again just copy this format down here. Oh, sorry, I'm doing A and B together here, but I should not be because I'm doing car A economics and car B economics separately. So never mind. You could lay this one out either way. You could organize it, by line item, revenues for car A and car B, labor costs for car A and car B, and so on. Or you can do it this way. Either one works absolutely fine. So just widen everything out so we can fit. And there's our revenues. So now let's do labor cost. let's just put in here cost per hour, and that is going to be the initial $45 per hour times if the currently active factory is union. Oops. Then I want my union cost row, which is $7, otherwise $6. That's the cost per hour. Yes, I'll put that out to 2 decimal places. Let's just see if we look across. Yep, okay. So now my car A labor cost is going to be, put a minus sign on it, the cost per hour times the hours worked on car A. Carry that across. Sorry, I'm behind my face again. Let's zoom down. So I'm just come over here to open out the columns and fit that again. And then materials cost. Now, the important thing with materials is, somewhere here it tells me, yes, to satisfy the production timeline, materials must be purchased and shipped to the factory in the quarter prior to production. So, first shipment of materials should be Q3 23. So, my materials cost, so for car A, it's just a fixed dollar amount per car. So it's just units produced times that dollars. Now I'll tell you, I did take a look through this question before. Like I said, I tripped up initially because I assumed that inflation would apply to, you know, everything, to materials cost, materials shipping, and so on. But I think actually that was not supposed to be the case. I'll check some answers in a little bit so we know that I'm not lying to you, but I think we're just not inflating that. So then materials shipping. So we've got 3,000 pounds of material per car A car. We're shipping it from supplier 1, which is 2,455 miles away. And I think we round that. So let's see, shipping costs. Yeah, mileage between locations is rounded up to the nearest increment of 100 miles for shipping the materials. It's not rounded for shipping the finished cars. So, it is, where are we? $2 for every 1,000 pounds for every 100 miles. So, we're going to say, there's a few different pieces going on here. I'm just going to put it all in a let. Dist to ship is going to be this guy here. And round distance is going to be, let's call it round up. Dist to ship over 100, round up to the nearest 0, and then multiply by 100. And then so we'll call it material volume is 3,000 pounds. And yes, then ship cost. Units. And I'm interested in the number of units in the next quarter, so I'll just point to that one there. And then my actual shipping cost is going to be units times material volume per unit, and then I'm interested in the cost per 1,000 pounds of that, times my round distance, and I have a cost per 100 miles of that, so divide by 100, times this shipping cost right here. And I think I need a minus sign in front of all of that. And there we go. Oh, and now that I see this, with materials shipping kicking in here, but materials cost only kicking in here, it immediately reminds me, nope, this should also have been pointing at the next quarter. So let's carry that across also. Now there's a weird thing going on here, which is that this, I did check in the answers, this is sort of deliberate, or at least consistent with the given answers. We're told, you know, we're modeling it for the first 15 years and assume no residual cash flows from the factory after the 60th quarter. So we are actually implicitly assuming we're not even buying in materials to build new cars after that. So it's, I don't know what that means. Maybe the factory is getting shut down after 15 years, or maybe we're selling it, but we're screwing over the person we're selling it to. That seemed a little weird to me, but anyway, it is what it is. Okay, so then next thing is car shipping cost. And now for this, we're interested in knowing how far are we shipping the cars. So here we're told that we sell 3% of our cars to dealer 1, which is 2,455 miles away, 6% of our cars to dealer 2, which is 1,275 miles away, etc. And so what we're going to be interested in is the average distance in miles, and that's just going to be going to take a sum product of this times, just need to flip this array from horizontal to vertical, so that's what the transpose is for. I'm going to lock that in because I need to be able to copy it across, and I'll just format that the same way, carry that across, and then here again, because I just have the one big X lookup, I can just expand that. So this is my average distance that I'm shipping. So my car shipping cost is going to be my number of units, this time I'm back in the current quarter because we don't ship it until we build it, times the average distance in miles, times the cost, which is somewhere up here, and this is the cost per 100 miles, so I'll just divide my miles by 100, and I need a minus sign in front of all of that because it is a cost. Format and carry across. So that's that, and then I get down to a gross profit for car A, which is that. And I'll just put a quick format there. And then car B economics, basically the same. I'll have to fix all the references here now, but that's fine. So let's just start off like this. So now that points down by 1, and now, so assumptions D33. So this whole section here, everything that's D in the 30s on the assumptions tab, I just want to make E. So switch that to E, and E$8, that's my inflation index, that stays the same for A and B, so carry that across. That's the revenues fixed, labor cost. I just want to point to E instead of A, and everything else stays the same. And then materials cost, I'm just copy pasting the actual formula text here because the copy pasted formula, is jumped off to point somewhere else entirely. So if I paste in the formula text, it's now easy for me to see, okay, so this one's pointing at A, so I just need to punt it down one to point at B. This is pointing at assumptions D, I want it pointing at assumptions E, and carry across. Then materials shipping. So I-46 distance to ship, that stays the same. The rounded version of that stays the same. The material volume, go from assumption D to assumption E. Then, oh, whoops, I did not copy down my thing, but anyway, my units should point to car B units in the next quarter, and then everything else stays the same. So carry that across. And then car shipping costs, again, I'll start off with this version because it'll be a little easier. So just shift that down one. That is the distance, that stays the same, and that's the cost per distance, that stays the same. So carry that across. And now we've got car A and B. And then we've got, let's call it indirect costs, which are training, admin, and I guess the factory build itself. So the training is just the cost of the time of the staff. So that's the number of people, so I need to multiply that by the hourly rate, but also by the number of hours per quarter. And put a minus sign in front of it. Okay, then the admin, we're told, is 5 million, and I think that is inflating at the same rate as labor. Yes, grow at the same rate as worker wages, and it gets paid starting when the factory begins training workers. So in other words, not in the first 4 quarters. So I'm going to say if the month, and again, you could just come over here and point to this cost and carry on from there and just leave these 4 blank. But again, 2 things. One is then this is not really a variable assumption, and if somebody comes and changes this and says actually we're going to speed it up and do it over 3 quarters or slow it down or whatever, then your model becomes inconsistent, and that's not good. So you're kind of implicitly hard coding an assumption. But the second thing is it's always just good to have formulas that copy all the way across, because then it's easier to check for inconsistencies. So that's why I'm going to have an if to give me where it should be 0. So if that month number is less than or equal to my number of build periods, then 0. Otherwise, that 5 million times, and we need to inflate it at the labor rate, which depends on whether they're union or not. So we go check if the current one is union. If that equals yes, yes, then I want the union one, which is $7. Otherwise, I want the non-union one, which is $6. And close the other bracket and put a minus sign in front of it all. Oops, minus sign goes here. So you can see there we've got the 3% inflation on the 5 million, and then that carries on across. And then the factory build itself is just going to be if month is less than or equal to build month, then build cost, and we're told that does not inflate, so it's just a straight $1 billion per quarter, otherwise 0. And again, that needs a minus sign because it's cost. And that runs for the 4 quarters and then goes away, which is exactly what you want. So then we were interested in EBITDA, which is going to be gross profit from A plus B plus the indirect costs, not the factory build, obviously, because that's CapEx. And then we have so yeah, we have EBITDA, then we have local taxes, and for that different factory locations, some of them have tax holidays, so let's factor that in first. We'll do a quick flag. Let's just do it as a section tax. Tax holiday, question mark. So what are we told about the tax holidays? Taxes are 0 in a quarter if there's a tax holiday in place. Tax holidays begin from the first quarter the factory is open for training, Q3 23. So I'm going to say if this is less than or equal to the build months, then 0. And if it's greater than that, but if it's less than or equal to the build months plus number of tax holiday quarters, then 1, otherwise 0. I think that's right. I'll have to check the logic in a second, but let's just copy it across first so we can see. So obviously with this one we have no tax holiday, so nothing to see here. So let's just change to W and see if that's coming through correctly. So the first tax holiday is as soon as we start doing anything, which makes sense. That's Q3 of 23, and that runs for exactly 4 years. 4 quarters. This is quarters, not years, right? Yes. Okay, so that's fine. We can switch back to V. And then local taxes, which I think we're told are taxes on. I found this slightly confusing actually when I looked at this earlier. The gross margin, i.e. revenues minus costs. I think of the gross margin as minus the direct costs, but not the indirect costs. But upon looking at this carefully, I determined that the local taxes were indeed meant to be on this minus all the costs. And we're told, where's it going? Sorry. Taxes are taxes are applied whether the gross margin is positive or negative, so you can get an immediate credit from local taxes on a loss. So in other words, no min, just minus that times the local tax rate, which is here. And again, I'll take that number format, carry it across. So you can see the first period we make a loss because we haven't done anything yet. We're just paying to train people. paying administrative costs and paying materials costs for cars that we're going to build next quarter. So we lose $250 million and we get a tax credit on that. And then after that, we start making money and we start paying taxes. So that's all fine. And then I'm going to want net cash flow. So let's say X construction, and that's just going to be EBITDA plus local taxes. Oh, by the way, sorry, a small point on the EBITDA that I glided over. But somewhere in here, I think it's in the questions, because I was wondering whether this was a little technical for college students, but it said assume EBITDA is simply cash inflows minus cash outflows. So in other words, here, for example, we are here we're paying materials costs for things that we don't actually use until the next quarter. So if you were being kind of strict about accounting EBITDA, you wouldn't expense these here. They would become like a balance sheet item, prepaid expenses or whatever, and they wouldn't actually hit as an expense until the next quarter. So if you're an accountant and you were looking at this thinking, oh my God, you did EBITDA wrong, it's not actually that I don't know how to do EBITDA. It's just that that was what we were supposed to do for this question. Which, I mean, that to me seems completely fair, because I looked at, I thought about the fact that the costs were coming in a different quarter, and I thought, wow, this would be, I mean, this whole thing seems very intimidating when I think back to me in college trying to do it. But that would have been, I feel like, almost a step too far. So anyway, EBITDA less the taxes is the X construction, and then total cash flows, this plus this, carry that across. So total cash flows, so it's like 14 billion excluding construction, 11 billion with the construction, and then I want my NPV. So I mentioned earlier you can just use the NPV formula. We've got a quarterly rate, 2.5%, and then you can just apply that to all of these. But the thing that well, I've been doing financy stuff for quite a while, and I still get a little tripped up by the default assumptions of the NPV. So let's just do it using the PV formula. If I say, oops, some product, or actually I can even just do discounted total. I'll do it line by line. Then it's this times my present value factor that I calculated up here. Copy that across, and then I can just sum those up. So there you can see that matches the NPV formula, which is great. But the thing to be wary of is that's assuming, that we're discounting basically back to the start of this first quarter. Often when you're building an NPV model, you might think of it as, you're making an investment in the first quarter and then you're getting returns thereafter. And NPV, to my mind, kind of discounts one period too far back, because it discounts to one period before you made your investment. So that's why I prefer to have an explicit PV here, where you can either have, the one here indicating you're discounting back to, the end of the period before the model, or like the first day of the first quarter, or you can put this here to show yourself that you're discounting back to the end of that first period, rather than having an implicit assumption by using the NPV formula. Obviously, if you're getting into more technical things, then you can also use the XNPV formula, and that will remove any ambiguity as to when you're discounting back to, because you give it the exact dates that you're interested in. So anyway, that's the model. Let's take a quick look at the questions people had to answer. So cumulative price inflation in the second quarter, the factory is open, Q4 of 23. Price inflation is this one. So it's 3.76%, which is there, good. Hourly cost of labor in the last period is $70.11. That's good. How many workers available for production in the first quarter of 24? Where are we? Employee count building in the first quarter of 24, 5,500. Fine. First quarter, the factory achieves 100% production. That is here. So Q2 of 25. Good. let's see, over the forecast, how many labor hours are allocated to car B in total? So car B building hours, and it's a total of 128,750,000. Good. Total material shipping costs for car A in Q4 23. So where's my car A? Economics. Material shipping in Q4 is 1.5 million. That's that one. Total material cost for car B in that same quarter, which is 12.5 million. All good. Total costs spent on producing all cars in Q4 23. This one completely tripped me up when I was looking at this earlier, because I thought to myself, okay, total cost, so I'll take that plus that, comes to 281 million. Doesn't match any of the answers here, and I completely tied myself in knots. I was like, okay, so maybe the cost of the cars produced in this quarter, maybe it means the materials that were bought in that quarter, so I'll take those ones, and that comes out too low. And eventually, finally, after thinking about this for an embarrassingly long time, I realized that the car shipping cost is not part of the cost of producing the car. So we've got just 268,412,500, which is that guy. Total labor training costs over the forecast period, that's down here. That is 235, 236, 679, 235, 236, 679, good. Average number of miles that a car is being sent from the factory to dealers, and that's the average that we worked out over here. So it's 1448. Total cost of shipping cars from the factories to dealers over the forecast period. So we just need to total this one plus, oops, plus this one. And that is 172,763,8,738. 172,763,8,738. Cool. So assume EBITDA is simply cash inflow minus cash outflow before taxes and without factory build costs. What is EBITDA in Q2 of 24? So we put that down here. Q2 of 24. 62,83,006. Yes. Total taxes paid in Q2 of 24. Is that same quarter? Yes. Q2 of 24. 1,808,490. Yes. Total net cash flows from producing the cars over the forecast period don't include the cost of the building in the factory, but do deduct any taxes paid. So that's this one, X construction, 14769755361. 14769755361. Yes, good. The NPV of all cash flows, that's either of these two over here, 2,237,284,131. Yes. And the 12-month forward EBITDA forecast at the start of Q4 2023 when car production begins. So I'll just put that in here. Forward EBITDA at the start. Now, if I was feeling really pedantic, I would do this as a sum ifs based on, you know, like taking this here as an argument, but I'm just going to be a little lazier and just do it straightforward sum. So we start producing in Q4, so the 4 quarters after that, 199, 47, 595, which is that one, cool. Okay, and then the last few questions are about comparing the different locations. So we're going to need to, well, let's see what we need to do. Which factory is closest to the parts supplier? So you can just look here, the min is 1612, take it there, it's W. So that's that one. Which factory is most central in the dealer network, meaning lowest average distance for shipping cars from the factory to dealers. And you can just look here at the average. Now, I wasn't totally sure when I read this question whether it meant kind of an unweighted average or weighted by how many you sent to each dealer. It turns out it doesn't matter. It's the same answer anyway. I did worry about that earlier. So that's also W, lowest distance. And then which factory has the highest NPV and which has the highest 12-month forward EBITDA. So for these two, I'm going to need to do a quick table. So let's just, there's always a bit of a trade-off, you know, if your assumption cell is on your assumptions tab and your model is over here, do you want to take the assumption away from your assumptions tab and and do your table here, or do you want to build your calculations table on your assumptions tab? Messy, messy either way. There is one little kind of way to squirrel around that, which is something I actually mentioned in one of my other videos. Oh, you're gonna have to name these though. So factories. So if I cut that onto this other tab, then it's pointing at, it doesn't point to another sheet because validation doesn't want to do that. But if you give it a named range, then it can point to another sheet. So now I've got that back. The sort of trade-off that you can do if you're feeling keen is you can put an ActiveX control in here that is a drop-down linked to this cell. If I was building this as a professional model and I needed to have this cell on the calculations tab, then I would do that so that you could still actually change the assumption on the assumptions tab. But this is the last 2 minutes of a competition question, so I'm definitely not going to do that. So location, selection. I'm interested in two things. I'm interested in the NPV and the forward EBITDA. So the NPV is this guy, and the forward EBITDA is this guy. And I'm interested in that for all the different factories. Sorry, I need to, yes, no, factories. Sorry, I need to transpose that so they go down. And then we're going to make a data table to say, okay, what do each of these two values become if I plug in V here, if I plug in W here, if I plug in X here, and so on. So to do that, just data table, column input cell is V, press enter. I'm going to copy the number formats here. And then we can see, okay, which one is the biggest? Max is 2499, which is Y. And the best forward EBITDA is 738703, which is W again. So the answers there are Y and W. So that's it. Not totally crazy as, you know, real grown-up financial models go, but I thought to myself, you know, what would it be like trying to build this if someone had asked me to build this model while I was in university? The honest answer is I would not have had a clue. I wouldn't have even known how to get started on this. So the fact that, you know, this group of people are already doing this kind of thing at that stage in their careers, you should keep an eye on them. They're going to achieve some impressive things over the next little while. And if you want to keep an eye on them right now, then you can watch them tomorrow compete in the live final, which I recommend. I'll certainly be tuning in to see what else they tackle and how they get on. All right, that's all I got for today. I'll be back sometime soon.